Welcome to Metadata-Driven Data Products. This is from chaos to clarity. In this session, we'll explore what actually makes a great data product. You'll learn how structure, access, trust, and ownership all come together, and how metadata is the key to turning scattered data into a reliable, business-ready product. So we're excited to be joined by George Firican today, founder of Lights on Data, a LinkedIn top voice for 2024, and one of the top 5 global thought leaders in big data and digital disruption. George's award-winning work in data governance, quality, and business intelligence has helped organizations around the world make sense of their data. And now he's here to share that expertise with us. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please put them in the chat, and a member of our team will reach out to you with answers during or after the webinar. And with that, I will turn it over to George.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for this lovely introduction. I just want to add, I am very passionate about this topic, but data in general. I love putting the lights on data. I think data needs to be treated as an asset, and I do create a lot of content because of it. So please feel free to check out any of my channels, and I promise you will not be disappointed. So regardless where you are right now, I am on the Pacific Coast here. It's morning, but regardless, just picture this. Imagine that you're walking down your local supermarket and you're looking for something quick for breakfast, right? So you're turning down the maybe like the cereal aisle, and you see 2 options. You see a box of cereal, and then you see a bag of cereal, both with the same price, let's say. And which one would you rather buy? My bet would be that it's probably the box. And not because we care about having a box per se, I don't know, maybe we do. But in addition to the cereal, what is that box providing us with? The box has a label, a name, a brand. In this case, I know I've just labeled it cereal, which might make it seem a bit like a dodgy product, but pretend it's a well-known brand of cereal. I was just trying to be vendor agnostic here, but I think you kind of get the point. By the way, what's your favorite cereal? Quick Oats, Lucky Charms. Anyways, you can put in the comments if you can. So back to the box. It gives me information about its ingredients, right? Nutritional facts, information about the manufacturer. How can I reach out to them if I have to? Often enough, we have a phone number that we can call, a website that we can check out. We can see where it's produced. There's some sort of a quality guarantee. There's an expiration date. That's important. All these things, all these details provide you with confidence that it's safe, that it's what you expect, that it's fit for your purpose. The bag, on the other hand, I mean, short of opening it and tasting it, I don't know. Now, if the bag had all of that information on it, then that would be up for consideration. So what does that have to do with what we're talking about here? Well, the box product has something extra than the bag product. That's metadata. It has metadata, and we care about that metadata. So hold on that thought, and let's take the same idea, bring it into our day-to-day work. So let's say that somebody's sending you a report. It has the numbers, the columns, maybe even the charts, but no headings, no definitions, no information about where the data came from, no timestamp, so you don't know how fresh it is, no context, no explanation, no contact person. To me, this is kind of like pouring that cereal from the unlabeled bag. You have no idea where it came from, how fresh it is, and what it's meant to tell you. Or let's take another example. Let's say you have access to this machine learning model. I don't know, something important, something that impacts decision making, but there's no documentation. There's no assumptions listed. There's no ownership to it. No idea how to interpret the output if you were to run it, or even who to talk to if something goes wrong. Now compare these to a report that has the title, has a reference to the business glossary, a last updated date, source attribution, maybe even a contact person, or the model that includes a bunch of metadata like version history and usage guidelines, and it's tied to an accountable owner. Now, of course, all this metadata is important. And between these two options in here, which one are you more likely to trust, to use, to recommend to others? My bet is the one on the right, the one with all that metadata. Because those trusted, well-documented, discoverable, and supported assets, now those are data products. So in this session, we're going to talk about metadata-driven data products. We're going to go over what a product is, what is a good data product. We're going to go over some examples as well. And then we're going to go into a lot more detail on the data product framework. That's where we're going to spend most of the time, and the data product team, and specifically the data product owner, data steward too. All right. So what is a data product? Truth be told, the term has been on for a while. One of the earliest mentions came from DJ Patel. He's this American mathematician and computer scientist, and he actually served as the chief data scientist of the United States Office of Science and Technology Policy. And back in 2012, he wrote this book called Data Jiu-Jitsu. And he defined a data product simply as a product that facilitates an end goal through the use of data. You know, it's a good start. I think it's a bit vague because in essence, he's saying anything that has data is a data product. But regardless, this idea really gained real structure and traction. And in 2019, Jean-Marc Degani introduced the concept of the data mesh, which I think that most of us heard of. And within the data mesh book that she wrote, she had 4 core principles. And one of these 4 core principles was to treat data as a product. And with it, she introduced a much more disciplined way to think about how data should be created, maintained, and delivered, basically with the same care and accountability as software products. And in this view, data was no longer just an IT output. It was something with a defined owner, clear purpose, quality standards, roadmap even. It was something that should be discoverable, trustworthy, valuable on its own. So that being said, let's go over a more maybe clear, more practical definition, one that I think supports modern use and reflects how organizations can actually apply the concept today. And that is that it's, again, not just about the data. A data product is this curated, trusted, and purpose-built data asset delivered with everything a consumer needs to find it, understand it, trust it, and use it. So again, it's not just about the data. It's about, if you will, about the experience around the data, how people, again, find it, understand it, trust it, use it. It's not just about having clean data, though that is important, but it's about designing that complete experience around the data and what it offers. So to support that experience, a strong and a good data product needs 5 things: data, of course, context, access, ownership, and trust. And we're going to go briefly over the purpose of each one. So the purpose of this data element is to have this deliver a usable, structured, purpose-fit content to our audience. Context is to help users interpret and apply the data the way that it should. Access would make the product discoverable, but also usable and then secure. Ownership, we need to ensure that accountability and care over time, because if there's no person behind it, then there's no maintenance. It's kind of left on its own, and that's not good. And the trust, of course, it builds that confidence through transparency and consistency. And as I mentioned, we're going to go over each one of these in details and see what each one of these really mean. We're going to go over some best practices there too. Yeah. So each one of these 5 elements is essential, but there's also one thing that links them all, and that's metadata. Metadata data is really what turns a raw data asset into a product too. It describes the structure of the data, it connects it with business terms, it documents how it's accessed, who owns it, how it's being validated. Without metadata, even the best data can become unusable, untrusted. So throughout the session, again, we're going to keep on coming back to metadata as the engine behind good data products. So if we take each one of them, again, for the data piece, metadata tells us what the data is, right? Its type, its origin, rules for quality. For the context, it makes that data understandable. How we define key metrics, how do we interpret a column? What does customer mean? For the access, it not only shows us how to reach the data, who can get to it and how often it's being updated, where it's being delivered, but also it's that usability piece to it too. For the ownership, it connects data to the people. Who's responsible? Who can answer questions about it? Who is maintaining it? And trust, it's helping us believe in that data through validation checks and refresh dates and version control and so many other things. Let's go over a few examples of a data product. Let's say we have this sales performance dashboard. This one is built for the sales leadership team. This dashboard brings together data from the CRM, marketing automation, and ERP system. It clearly has definitions on KPIs like qualified lead. It links back to source systems. It's updated nightly. It's accessible through self-service BI tools and APIs, and it's owned and maintained by the sales operations analytics team. So why is this one a data product? It's discoverable, it's documented, it's owned, it's maintained with a defined business value, if you will. Or a customer master's data API. This product also provides a unified governed view of customer records. It's combining CRM, website, and support systems data. It includes metadata for PII. It supports both internal and external customers via API, and not only. It has documentation that outlines schema and access rules, and it's maintained by the data engineering team. And I think we are starting to see a pattern here, but I'm going to give you a couple more examples. This one is a machine learning model for churn predictions. So it's a predictive model. It's built to identify which customers are likely to churn within 30 days. It's consumed by customer success and marketing teams. The model includes input and output schema documentation. It has version control, retraining protocols. The results are delivered via dashboards, but also via APIs, because it really depends on who is on the other end of the consumption. And it's owned by the product analytics team. And lastly, we have this financial forecasting data set. It's publishing forecasted revenue and expenses by region and business unit. It's aggregated from past financial data and external indicators. The data set includes business assumptions, semantic mappings, metric definitions. We know it's trusted by finance, by strategy, by investor relations, and it's refreshed quarterly. And of course, we have that version control. So again, I think we're seeing some patterns here. The thing that I want you to notice is that none of these are just data sets kind of sitting in a warehouse. They're all built with purpose, and we all understand the purpose. They're discoverable, they're documented, they're maintained, they're usable by real teams. Yeah. So that's what really makes them data products and not just data outputs. That being said, what would be an example of a not data product? I think a really good one to look at is just a raw data set that it's in a data lake. There's no descriptions, no table that no owner, there's no into a bucket. So why this one is not a data product? Because there's no structure, no discoverability, no accountability. It's data at rest, if you will, not data with value. This one, the one-off report, this one gets me a lot. And I've encountered a lot of these along the years. It's something that's built once, it's never maintained. There's no documented logic source or a data steward attached to it. And I think even with the rise of these self-serve BI tools, which don't get me wrong, I think it's great and they enable so much discoverability, and it's putting the answers into the hands of the business stakeholders. For sure, there's so many benefits to it, but it's also creating all these artifacts that are only being used once, and then you kind of forget about them, but they're sitting there getting dust, so to speak. Now, even with well, what is it called? Gen BI, we just talk to the BI tool and tell it what report you want to generate it. More and more, where we're creating these artifacts, these products, if you will, that are not being maintained. Right? You're creating something and you're forgetting about it. You come back a month later, you even forgot what assumptions you made and what maybe filters you put on, and how you define different things, and it sort of becomes unusable and untrusted. So what do? You just create another one. Anyways, so an example like this, a one-off report, it's not a data product because there's no life cycle to it. There's no guarantee of that accuracy. There's nobody to reach out to when it breaks. Even if that person is you, again, you might have forgotten all these things and you can't really reproduce them. So you just kind of start from scratch again. Another example would be an API fee with no documentation. Again, it returns the data, but it lacks a schema. It lacks a business meaning. The access is unclear. Support is non-existent. It's not a data product. I mean, it might be a pipeline, but it's not a data product. Or a table with cryptic columns. And I think we see a lot of these too, right? It's columns named like rev underscore flag underscore 001. There's no glossary. There's no tying into a data dictionary. Again, no definitions. There's no hint on how to use it. And in this case, again, it's not a data product because without context, even if that data within that table was correct, was accurate, without the context, that becomes unusable. So one thing I want you to remember is that just because something contains data, it doesn't mean that it's a data product or a good data product. A good data product is discoverable, understandable, trusted, usable. And there's somebody behind it to ensure it stays that way too. Yeah. So a good data product is more than a data set. It's more than a dashboard. It's this complete experience, something that's designed to be used, to be understood, to be trusted by others. And after working with dozens of organizations, I've really found out that the best data products consistently include these 5 essential elements. And we're going to walk over them together, as I mentioned. And remember, while all of these, I think they can stand on their own, they're all connected and they're all enabled by one critical thing, and that's metadata. Okay, before we go into each one, I want to give you another analogy. And I always kind of go back to food when I make some of these analogies. So think of data as the ingredient, the context as the recipe, access as the packaging, ownership as the chef and the kitchen team behind it, and trust is kind of the likelihood of you eating it or even recommending that dish to others. Okay, let's go over into each one. So on the data side, I think this is the most obvious ingredient. We need to have that data itself, but raw data alone is not enough, right? For it to serve as the foundation of a good data product, it must be deliberately shaped and fit for its intended purpose. So you should design your schema intentionally. It shouldn't just reflect how the data was stored upstream. It should also reflect how that product will be consumed downstream. So for that end, you should use clear and consistent field names and data types. If you can, avoid cryptic labels like rev underscore flag underscore 001. Stick to naming that's self-explanatory or easily mapped to business terms if you can't have a control over those labels. Also, don't include everything. A good data product doesn't kind of throw the kitchen sink at the user. You should include only the data that supports the intended purpose or use case. And that's going to make it easier to maintain it as well and document it, of course. Because, yeah, you should document the source systems and update frequency and all these different details. It's always good to make sure that the consumers know where the data came from, how fresh it is. This builds confidence. This allows them to troubleshoot when things fell off. And of course, you got to make sure that your product works for the tools that your users rely on. So for example, an unstructured image data may require embedding metadata for classification models, whereas tabular data should align with BI tool expectations. Now, when we talk about data in the data product, we're not just talking about what's stored, right? We're talking about how it's structured, how it's consistent, how it consistently can be reused. And I want to talk about ER Studio here a little bit because I think this tool really shines here. It supports both top-down modeling, so starting with the business concepts, and bottom-up modeling, working with existing physical systems. And this means that you can design cleanly from scratch or reverse engineer from your current mess, if you will. Why is this important? Because structure matters. It's the foundation for everything, right? If the foundation is wrong, kind of everything else collapses. And ER Studio enforces naming standards and validation rules, and it's helping prevent schema inconsistencies that break dashboards, that break pipelines, or worse, you can break trust. ER Studio supports this reusable modeling templates too. It's one of the things that I thought was really cool. It's kind of like this copy paste, but smart, if you will. You can replicate proven design patterns like confirmed dimensions and data vault structures and normalized tables across domains without having to reinvent the wheel. And this is really metadata in action. The context, again, context turns data into something that people can use with confidence. It's not enough to give somebody a column that's called churn_flag. They need to know what it means, how it's calculated, when was it last updated too. So how do you provide that context? The best way is to use a business glossary, a data dictionary to define all these key terms. Make sure that the metrics are explained, not just what they're called, but really how they're being calculated, under what assumptions. Ideally, you can also show the lineage. Let users see the path from the raw data to the final output. And definitely translate this technical language into business-friendly language, so people don't need to go through a developer all the time to decode a table that they might have access to. I think really a good practice to follow is to treat context like part of the product interface. Here's what I mean. If a user opens your data product in whatever form, it's a dashboard, it's a model, it's a data mart itself, and they're looking at it and they can't answer what does this mean within a minute, within a few seconds, then the context is missing, and that can be a problem. And context needs to be where the user is. It shouldn't be buried in like a SharePoint folder or an old PDF or an email. It should live alongside the data, within a catalog, a glossary, on the semantic layer, or a data notebook, whatever your setup there is. And again, use business language, not system labels whenever you can. Define those metrics, define the logic. No, don't just show the value of the conversion rate, but document how it's being calculated. What's the numerator? What's the denominator? Are there any filters applied? Ideally, even link it to like the KPI, the certified KPI, the defined and approved KPI in your business glossary, if you have that set up. And again, keep that context close to the data. The more tightly integrated your context is, the more likely users will understand, trust, and use that product correctly. Yeah. So again, can the people understand your data, right? That's where the context comes in. And it's often where some data products fall short. in ER Studio's case, I think it helps solve this by embedding context directly into the model. It doesn't just capture the technical metadata, like the data types, constraints, relationships, but allows you to define and manage business metadata. The terms, the descriptions, the rules, the real world meaning, if you will, that gives your data purpose. And this is critical. I'm a keen believer that this context is critical, and we need to have those definitions and these explanations. It's also not just about exposing the schema to you. You're kind of telling a story about the data, what the data represents, and how it should be used. ER Studio doesn't just treat the business glossary as a separate document that maybe nobody reads, right? It actually links glossary terms to model elements. So if you define customer, you can tie that definition to the actual tables and fields where the customer data lives. And that way, when somebody is reviewing a model or looking through, Team Server, they can immediately understand what they are seeing. They don't have to, chase down this information within a PDF. They don't have to email a data steward or their colleague. They have it there. And the best part is that all of this is accessible through a browser. There's no need for a, modeling license to kind of see how a metric is being calculated or where a term is being used. And this kind of embedded, accessible context is what makes a data product discoverable and understandable and trusted, especially by the business users who aren't fluent in schema. And they shouldn't be in the first place. So ER Studio really helps you move from metadata as documentation to metadata as experience. Yeah. Oh, there's actually one more piece to the puzzle, and that's lineage. I think I mentioned it before. Lineage, as you know, it lets you see how data flows from source systems through transformation layers into, of course, your final model. And it's all within the same modeling environment. What this means is that context isn't static, it's traceable. You can answer, questions like, what is this? But also, where did this come from? What happened to it along the way? Lineage gives you all of this. Now, you'll see how each one of these kind of ties to the other. And yes, they can all stand on their own, but they're all important and also connected, because even the best data product won't make an impact if people can't get to it or even know that it exists. So that's why access is critical. It's really more than just permissions. Permissions is one thing, sure, but it's also about that accessibility, that usability, that discoverability. Some of the best practices that I want to mention is that you should definitely offer access methods that match your audience. So it's okay to offer multiple ones. You don't need to just have one for each data product. For example, you would have APIs for engineers. You have dashboards for the business users. You would have SQL queries for analysts. Offer them depending on that business use and the audience, the users on the other end. Sure, you should also implement, role-based access controls. Not everybody should be able to use everything, and definitely making a product easy to find in a data catalog, in a data product portal, or some sort of a shared workspace. That's definitely a good practice to follow, because your data product should be easy to find. If somebody has to send a Slack message to 3 people or file a ticket to just locate it, then it means that it's not accessible. No matter how secure or elegant it is, then maybe it's not a good data product. Yeah. Most importantly, I think you need to design the access experience the way you would design a consumer app. And that's what Degani was kind of alluding to as well. When you first interact with it, is it clear what the product does? Think about it, your phone, and when you go to whatever app store you have access to and you'd download an app, even when before you download the app, it's kind of clear what you're looking for and what your expectation is of that product, right? It gives you that introduction first, and then when you open it, most of the time you can kind of figure out how to use it without having to go through a lot of training. So have all of these concepts and ideas in mind when you design your data product too. Because if access isn't intuitive, I think users will also bypass it. Worse, actually, if it's not intuitive, users will use it, but use it incorrectly. That's not okay either. So yeah, as I mentioned, can people actually find the your data product and then the metadata tied to it? It's more than just the technical connectivity. With ER Studio, the models and metadata that you create aren't locked away, in a developer tool. They're published to the team server, which is this centralized searchable web interface where users can explore and understand what is available. Kind of like to think of it as a data marketplace where the product is metadata rich. It's ready for use. So users can search by business terms and keyword and tag, where you can even have custom defined properties. So whether you're looking for a report or a subject area or a specific attribute, it's easy to find the right asset. But of course, access also has to be controlled. And that's built in too. With ER Studio, you can have role-based access control. You can ensure that users only see the assets and the metadata that they're authorized to view. And I think this can balance security with transparency too. And for organizations already using a broader data catalog like Colibra or Purview, that's fine too, because ER Studio provides API-based access to its metadata. So you can federate discovery across platforms and you can deliver this unified experience. The takeaway here is simple, okay? Data access is not just about, pipelines and role-based security there, but it's about discoverability. And discoverability depends on good metadata, good interfaces, good governance. And this ties me into ownership. Ownership is another big issue with data products, right? Remember those one-time off reports that I was mentioning, right? Those don't really have ownership because it's not enough to just build something and kind of toss it over the wall, put it into that folder or make it available on your web portal. There needs to be a named human behind it, somebody who understands how it works, how it's used, how it creates that value in the first place. So then they can communicate and deliver that further. So in a data product, this means ownership. And I don't think ownership is optional. You need to have an ownership. There's typically two key roles here. We're going to talk about this later on. The first one is the data product owner. So they are accountable for the product's usefulness, alignment with the business needs, the life cycle from launch to retirement. And then you also have the data steward. To me, they're kind of these unsung hero. They're responsible for maintaining business definitions and field level documentations and ensuring quality standards. At a minimum, all this means that the data product owner is responsible for the delivery direction and the value. The data steward kind of handles the definitions, documentation, the quality. But of course, it doesn't stop here. You also need to define who supports the product when users have questions, who approves or implements changes, what the escalation path is looking like if something goes wrong. So some good practices here, of course, ensure that every data product has this data product owner, they have a data steward, and people are aware of who these individuals are. You should also communicate some sort of what's the expected response time for questions or issues. But the real test is the following. If the data product goes stale, if something goes wrong, if it breaks, if it causes a downstream issue, can somebody be held accountable? And it's not about finger pointing, but it's about making sure that yes, there is somebody that will be able to jump in and help with all of these. So if the answer to these questions is no, there's nobody that we can think of, then it's not a good data product. It's this orphaned artifact. It's that lone wolf report that you're just using once. Because if nobody owns it, nobody will maintain it. And again, when something breaks, nobody's accountable. Your Studio actually tackles this by turning ownership into metadata, if you will. It lets you assign named individuals, whether they're data stewards or subject matter experts or full product owners, directly to entities, to attributes, to the entire model. And that role assignment isn't buried in again, a PDF, a slide deck, or it's not stuck in somebody's inbox, right? It's captured and it's stored as metadata. It's searchable across the platform. It's visible in documentation, and lineage views, and catalogs. And this also makes governance enforceable. You're not just saying, we need documenting who's responsible for what and making that part of the product itself. And beyond just visibility, ER Studio enables all the good things that you want about it, like reporting on stewardship. You can export then these role assignments and generate audit reports, or you can monitor gaps in coverage, which is essential for regulated industries and data governance frameworks too. Because one of the biggest blockers to data trust is not knowing who to talk to. And I know I'm kind of jumping the gun here into the trust piece, but I want to mention that ER Studio really solves that by making ownership part of that experience, right? It's embedded in the metadata. It's discoverable in the UI. It's trackable over time too. All right, so I kind of jumped into the trust piece as well. But let's remember, trust is the currency of data products. It doesn't matter how accurate, how complete your data is. If people don't trust it, they won't use it. So how do we build that trust? Well, we should start with that visibility. Show when data was last updated. If, like, at a minimum, that's what should be done. You should display whether it passed, the quality checks. Have the version history accessible. You can even certify data products and explain what that certification means. And of course, communication is key. Share what's changing in your data product, why it's changing. Surface known issues. Don't bury them. Don't hide them from people. Communicate often. So again, as a best practice, it's good to include those trust indicators. Like, when was it last refreshed? Was it certified or not? A good practice is also to track and publish usage stats. It helps prove value and it builds confidence. If a product is heavily used, I think that builds confidence, right? Think of it when you're browsing through the Amazon store. When you're seeing a product has been bought 40,000 times, you have a bit more trust than one that was only bought 10 times. I mean, if it's barely touched, maybe that's a signal too. Then again, sure. You can also see that a report has only been run 12 times in the past year. Well, maybe that means that it's only being used on a monthly basis, and maybe that's its purpose, and that's okay too. But overall, these usage stats also help you prioritize improvements and deprecations. So when you need to prioritize which one you need to take care of first, maybe you can leave the one that you run on a monthly basis. You put that at the back of the line for now, and you tackle the one that it's being used 100 times in a day by 100 people. The other thing that I touched on as well is that version control. Let users know when logic changed or anything has changed about the data product, and have that regular communication. Tell people if a refresh has failed, if a metric has changed, if an assumption was being updated. If you have that silence, that will erode trust for sure. Even if the data is fine, people will start losing faith in it. Because trust isn't really built by just saying, just trust me, it's good. It's built by giving users clear, reliable signals over time. And let's remember this, once trust is broken, it takes a lot more effort to rebuild it. So let's try and design it from the start. Let's build in that trust within the data product. Trust is fragile, right? And it's earned through transparency and consistency and responsiveness. ER Studio in this case gives teams the tools to make trust part of the product experience and not just a hopeful outcome. So for starters, it captures and surfaces version history and that certification status across your models. And that way users can see if something is approved, if something's under review or deprecated, of course, also when it was last changed. You can also implement validation rules and structure review workflows, and you can ensure that changes to the model go through proper review before being published, before being promoted. And this is also crucial for quality assurance and not just trust, and especially in regulated environments. This is key. ER Studio also supports refresh scheduling, documentation of known limitations too. And what does that mean? Well, the end user isn't just left wondering, is the data current or is something missing? They can check the model and know exactly what they're dealing with. So one of the most overlooked dimensions of trust, and I mentioned this a few, usage visibility. And ER Studio lets you track how models are being used. What's the most referenced? What might be stale? And I think this is really key. Okay, I went over quite a few of these best practices, and there's a lot to take away there. But if there's one thing I want you to remember for each one, for the data piece as a best practice, try and design that schema that's aligned with real world usage. Don't include everything in there. The context, yeah, use glossaries, use dictionaries, and that semantic layer to define the meaning and make that transferable and viewable to the end user. As an access, again, offer access methods that are tailored to different audiences. You don't need to just offer one type of access. We need to have a named data product owner and a visible data steward that are always assigned to our data product. And for the trust, I encourage you to show that validation status, that usage stats, and of course, the refresh information. And the ER Studio, again, supports all these elements as part of our data product framework there. And I'll leave this slide for you as a reference, but I'll go over really quickly here. So again, on the data side, their ER Studio supports the top-down and bottom-up modeling across all the layers. On the context, that's connecting glossary terms to actual model elements. On the access, you have the team server that makes that metadata discoverable through the web interface. And of course, it enforces role-based access, so the right people see the right things. For the ownership, it allows you to assign the data stewards, the owners, SMEs to specific models, entities. And on the trust, it captures that version history, certification status, validation workflows. It tracks who made changes, what changed, and when. And of course, it has an integration with tools like Colibra and Purview to kind of extend that governance across your system. So anyways, it has a lot more there. But a good data product needs all of these. It needs the data because that provides the content. It needs the context because that makes it meaningful and understandable. It has the access because it makes it reachable and by the right people in the right place at the right time. It has the ownership that keeps it maintained, and trust who makes it usable over time. And again, behind it all, we have that metadata, which is that glue that holds this entire framework together. So if you build a data product with these 5 in mind, you'll create better data products. And not only that, but you'll create data products that people actually use and trust. It's important. But of course, data products aren't built by tools. They're built by people. You can have the best platform, the cleanest pipelines, the most sophisticated models, but if the people behind them aren't aligned, you end up with friction, duplication. You end up with a product that nobody uses, that nobody trusts. So that's why it's important to understand not just what a data product is, but also the who, and the how, of each person, how they contribute to making it valuable, usable, sustainable. So let me introduce you to the 5 roles that consistently show up in successful data product teams. And the first one is the data product owner. So this is the one that's steering the ship. They define the why behind the product, and they make sure it delivers actual value. Then we have the data steward. This one ensures that what's being delivered, it's understandable, it's documented, it's trustworthy. The data engineer makes the product technically real, because they're building the pipelines, they're shaping that data, they're structuring the schema. And I want to say that depending on the organization, these titles might have different names. Then we have the data ops engineer. This one ensures the product runs reliably and also scales up if needed. They handle things like automation, monitoring, deployment pipelines, and it has an asterisk here because in many organizations, they also wear the hat of a BI engineer or a platform engineer. They might be the ones provisioning, I don't know, like Power BI or Tableau workspaces, or setting up refresh schedules, or embedding dashboards into other tools, or supporting APIs for analytics consumption. So in larger organizations, this may be a separate role entirely, like a BI platform engineer, like I mentioned, or embedded analytics lead. Anyways, the names are countless. But in smaller or linear teams, it's often rolling up into this data ops engineer function. And lastly, we also have the business subject matter expert. This is the voice of the consumer, right? They are defining the data needs. More that what data needs to say, if you will. They're validating whether it actually speaks that business language. Now, again, some of these roles may be formal, others might be filled by people wearing multiple hats. But when you look at a successful data product, these perspectives are always there. So a data product is always a team effort. It's not just a technical artifact. All right. Now, I do want to enforce the fact that every strong data product team has these 5 roles, but 2 of them stand out because they do touch everything. They touch each one of those like 5 elements within our data product framework. And these are the 2 roles that turn a data set into an actual product, in my opinion. It's, again, the data product owner and the data steward. Let's think of them as co-pilots. The product owner is responsible for the flight path, why we're flying in the first place, where are we headed, how do we measuring the success. And the steward is responsible for making sure that the instruments are calibrated, the passengers understand what's happening, the aircraft is compliant, it's safe. All right, let's start with the data product owner really quickly. This person is accountable for the value the product delivers. They align the product with stakeholder needs, and they define success criteria, prioritize use cases. They ensure the product actually gets adopted. They're that bridge between the data and the business outcome. On the other side, the data steward, well, their job is to make sure the product is usable, it's trusted. So that means, again, defining and curating business terms, managing data quality indicators, documenting metrics, keeping everything aligned with policies and expectations. So if a user is asking, what does this metric mean, or can I trust this report, the data steward has made sure that answer is clear and it's findable. And these roles are complementary. They're not hierarchical. One ensures the right thing is being built. The other one ensures it's built the right way with transparency, accountability, trust. And this partnership needs to be strong. Yeah, again, these 5 elements, the data, context, access, ownership, and trust, they form the core of any good data product. And as you can see here, both the product owner and the data steward are involved in all 5 of them. So it's very important, very important. And I'll leave you with this mapping here on how each one of these other roles are being mapped to the other focus areas or elements of our data product framework. But in essence, what I want you to take away from this is that metadata is important. As part of the framework, we need the data, the context, access, ownership, and trust. And we typically have those 5 different hats of our product team to help us deliver a good data product. And the data product owner and the data steward, they're also key. Not that the other ones are not, but often when we're creating products, we see the data engineer, we see the data ops engineer, we of course have the business subject matter expert, but often enough, we don't have the data product owner and the data steward. So that's why I wanted to spend a little bit more time on those two to reinforce how important these are. All right, we're coming to a close here, but I did want to mention that I do appreciate you giving your time to be here today to learn from this presentation. Please feel free to get in touch with me. I loved meeting new people, in person or online. So feel free to reach out and contact me on LinkedIn. And as a reminder, again, if you do have any questions, please scan the QR code and contact a Year Studio expert.